The first time my 6-year-old daughter saw the woman who would change our lives, she walked straight across a crowded grocery store, took her hand, and asked, "Are you our new mom?" The woman froze so completely that even the smile on her face disappeared. I wanted to disappear with it, because I knew something my daughter didn't. I had never told that woman about my children, and yet the way she looked at my little girl made me wonder if she had been waiting for us long before we ever met. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. My name is Elliot Mercer, and for 3 years, I had been raising my 2 children alone. My daughter, Poppy, was 6, and my son, Caleb, had just turned 9. From the outside, we probably looked like an ordinary little family trying to keep life moving. We lived in a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, drove an old blue Honda that had a stubborn passenger door, and had a kitchen refrigerator covered in school drawings, grocery lists, and photographs held up by crooked magnets. But anyone who knew us well understood that our home had one enormous absence in it. Their mother, Nora, was gone. She hadn't died. Somehow, that had made losing her harder. Nora had left on an ordinary Tuesday morning 3 years earlier. There had been no dramatic goodbye, no screaming match in the driveway, no final embrace. She had simply told me she needed some time away, kissed Caleb on the forehead, brushed Poppy's hair away from her eyes, and promised she would call that evening. She never did. Weeks became months, and eventually I learned through a lawyer that she had moved to another state and wanted no contact with the children for the foreseeable future. I spent months telling myself she would come back. Then I spent another year telling the children that sometimes adults became confused and needed time. Eventually, I stopped making promises I couldn't keep. Poppy remembered her mother in fragments. She remembered the smell of vanilla lotion, the way Nora used to braid her hair, and a yellow raincoat they had once bought together. Caleb remembered more, but he rarely spoke about it. He had developed a strange habit of checking the driveway whenever a car slowed outside our house. Whenever I noticed, I pretended I hadn't. I had also stopped dating. Not because I believed love was impossible, but because I couldn't bear the thought of bringing someone into our lives only to watch her disappear too. My children had already learned that people could leave without warning. I wasn't willing to teach them that lesson twice. Then, one Monday afternoon, I met Nora Bell. It happened at the local library, of all places. I had taken the kids there because Poppy needed a book for a school project, while Caleb wanted to use one of the computers. I was standing near the children's shelves when I noticed a woman kneeling beside a little boy who couldn't reach a book on the top shelf. She was probably in her early 30s, wearing a pale green sweater and holding a stack of returned books against her hip. She noticed the boy struggling, reached up, handed him the book, and smiled as though it were the most important thing she had done all day. Something about that stayed with me. Her name was Nora, and she worked at the library 3 days a week. Our first conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Our second lasted 20. By the third week, Poppy had started asking whether we were going to the library lady's place. I laughed the first time she said it. The second time, I didn't. Nora was patient with the children in a way that never felt forced. She didn't try to become their friend overnight. She didn't bring gifts or make promises. She simply listened. When Caleb talked about a science project, she asked questions. When Poppy showed her a drawing, Nora studied it seriously and pointed out details I hadn't even noticed. One Saturday morning, we ran into her at a farmer's market. She was carrying a paper bag of apples when Poppy grabbed my hand and whispered that Nora looked pretty. I told her she shouldn't say things like that. Poppy looked confused and asked why. I didn't have an answer. Over the next several months, Nora slowly became part of our lives. Not officially. Not completely. She never stayed overnight, never crossed boundaries, and never tried to replace Nora. But she became someone we could call when Caleb's school bus was late or when Poppy lost her favorite stuffed rabbit. And I began falling in love with her. That frightened me more than I can explain. Because love wasn't the problem. Trust was. Every time Nora laughed in our kitchen, some part of me imagined the day she might stop. Every time she hugged Poppy goodbye, I wondered if I was letting my daughter become attached too quickly. And every time Nora looked at me with that quiet warmth in her eyes, I remembered the woman who had once looked at me the same way and then vanished. I kept those fears to myself. Then came the grocery store. It was a bright Thursday afternoon, and I had taken the children shopping after school. Nora happened to be there too, standing near the produce section. I saw her before she saw us. Poppy saw her first. She suddenly let go of my hand and ran. I called her name, but she was already crossing the aisle. Nora turned just as Poppy reached her. My daughter looked up at this woman she had grown so attached to, tilted her head, and asked the question that made the entire world seem to stop. "Are you our new mom?" Nora's face went pale. She looked at Poppy, then at me. I expected embarrassment. Instead, I saw fear. Real fear. She crouched slowly until they were eye level and gently touched Poppy's shoulder. Then she whispered something so quietly I couldn't hear it. Poppy's smile faded. Nora stood, handed me the grocery basket she had been carrying, and walked away without another word. I followed her outside. "Nora, wait." She stopped near the parking lot but didn't turn around. When she finally faced me, tears were already in her eyes. She said she was sorry. I asked her what she was sorry for. She said, "Because I should have told you the truth before your daughter ever asked me that question." My stomach tightened. What truth? She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was old and slightly bent. She handed it to me. The picture showed Mara, my children's mother. She was standing beside a young woman I didn't recognize. Nora. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Nora explained that the woman beside Mara was her older sister, Elise. 3 years earlier, Elise had been Mara's closest friend. And Elise had died. My hands started shaking. Nora told me that after Elise's death, Mara had blamed herself. She said Elise had been struggling emotionally, and Mara believed she had missed warning signs. They had argued shortly before Elise's death. Mara had never forgiven herself. But there was more. Nora had known about my children long before she met me. She had known my name. She had even seen photographs of Poppy and Caleb. I felt betrayed all over again. You knew who we were? Nora nodded. How? Her answer broke something inside me. Mara contacted me. I stared at her. She explained that 6 months before she disappeared, Mara had reached out to Nora because she was afraid she was becoming like Elise. She was overwhelmed, depressed, and terrified she would eventually hurt herself or the children emotionally. She told Nora she needed to leave before she destroyed everyone she loved. Nora had tried to convince her to get help. But Mara left anyway. Then, months later, Mara sent Nora a letter. In that letter, she asked Nora to watch over us from a distance. Not as a replacement. Not as a mother. Just as someone who could make sure the children were okay. Nora had agreed. I couldn't understand whether I wanted to scream at her or collapse into her arms. You've been watching us? Not secretly, she said through tears. I didn't follow you. I didn't spy on you. I only knew where you lived because Mara told me. When I saw you at the library, I recognized Poppy from the photographs. I almost walked away. But then she smiled at me. I looked down at the photograph again. What did Mara say about me? Nora hesitated. Then she said you were the safest man she'd ever known, and that was exactly why leaving you hurt so much. I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. For 3 years, I had believed Mara left because we weren't enough. Now I wondered if she had left because she believed she wasn't enough for us. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. I drove home that afternoon in silence. Caleb sat beside Poppy in the back seat, unaware of the storm inside me. Poppy kept asking whether Nora was angry with her. I told her no. She asked if Nora was still our friend. I said yes. Then she asked the question I couldn't answer. Does that mean Mommy is coming home? I pulled the car over. I turned around and looked at both my children. I realized something terrible. I had spent years protecting them from the truth, but sometimes protecting someone from pain only gives pain more room to grow. I told them their mother had loved them. I told them she had been sick in a way that couldn't be seen from the outside. I told them she had made choices that hurt us. And I told them that loving someone didn't mean pretending they had never hurt you. Caleb looked down at his hands. Poppy asked whether Mommy had forgotten us. No, I said. I think she remembered you every single day. That night, Nora came to our house. She didn't come to ask for forgiveness. She came to return the photograph. I told her to keep it. Then I asked whether she had heard from Mara recently. Nora shook her head. But she handed me another envelope. My name was written on it. My heart stopped. Mara had mailed it to Nora 2 weeks earlier. Inside was a letter. She wrote that she had finally gotten help. She had been working with a counselor, rebuilding her life slowly, and learning to live with the damage she had caused. She didn't ask me to take her back. She didn't ask me to tell the children she was coming home. She asked for one thing. She wanted to see them. Not to become their mother again. Just to say goodbye properly if that was all they would allow. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in my hands, unable to decide what kind of father I needed to be. Part of me wanted to protect my children from her forever. Another part knew that children deserved answers. So I called Mara. Her voice on the phone was barely recognizable. She cried when she heard my voice. She said she was sorry. I told her sorry couldn't erase 3 years. She said she knew. I told her the children had grown. She said she knew. I asked how she could possibly know. She whispered, because Nora sends me their school pictures. That was the moment my anger finally broke open. I realized Nora had been carrying something none of us had understood. She had been standing between a mother who was too broken to return and 2 children who were too young to understand why she left. Nora hadn't betrayed us. She had been keeping a promise. But keeping that promise had cost her something too. She had fallen in love with me while knowing that the woman I loved before her might someday return. I asked her why she stayed. She looked at me and said, because your children deserved at least one adult who wouldn't leave just because things became complicated. I couldn't speak. A week later, we met Mara at a small park. It was a sunny afternoon. She stood beside a bench, trembling so badly that she kept rubbing her palms together. Poppy saw her first. She didn't run. She simply stared. Mara knelt. Hi, sweetheart. Poppy's eyes filled with tears. Then she walked forward. For a moment, I thought she might hug her. Instead, she asked, why did you leave? Mara covered her mouth. She told the truth. She said she had been overwhelmed by her own mind, ashamed of needing help, and terrified that if she stayed, she would eventually make things worse. She admitted that leaving had still been wrong. Poppy listened. Then she hugged her. Caleb took longer. He stood several feet away, his jaw tight, tears running silently down his face. Finally, he stepped forward. He didn't hug Mara. He simply said, I was angry at you for a long time. Mara nodded. You had every right. Caleb wiped his eyes. Then he asked whether she was going to disappear again. Mara promised she wouldn't disappear without telling them. This time, I believed her. Not because promises were enough. Because she had finally learned that love required responsibility. Months passed. Mara became part of the children's lives slowly, carefully, with professional guidance and clear boundaries. She didn't move back into our home. She didn't demand forgiveness. She earned trust one ordinary afternoon at a time. And Nora stayed. But our relationship changed. For the first time, I stopped asking whether she could replace Mara. She couldn't. And she never needed to. Nora became something better. She became Nora. The woman who knew our history and chose our future anyway. One spring afternoon, nearly a year after that grocery store question, we were walking through the same market where everything had begun. Poppy was holding Nora's hand. Caleb was carrying a bag of apples. Mara was meeting us later for lunch. Poppy suddenly looked up at Nora. I braced myself. She smiled and said, You're not our new mom. Nora laughed softly. Poppy squeezed her hand. You're just Nora. But you're family. Nora stopped walking. She covered her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. I reached for her hand. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what the future might take away. I understood that family isn't always created by blood, marriage, or perfect circumstances. Sometimes family is built slowly, through ordinary afternoons, difficult conversations, forgiven mistakes, and people who choose to stay when staying is hard. Speech balloon special request, before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in this situation? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring stories. Your support encourages us to keep creating stories that touch hearts around the world. Looking back, I still think about the question Poppy asked that day, Are you our new mom? She thought she was asking whether someone could fill an empty place. But she taught all of us something much deeper. Some empty places are not meant to be filled by replacing the person who left. They are healed by allowing new love to stand beside the old wounds without pretending those wounds never existed. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting betrayal, and second chances don't mean erasing consequences. Sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to let someone else's worst decision become the final chapter of your life. And sometimes, the most beautiful families are the ones that find each other after everything has already fallen apart.